The Cades Cove Preservation Association appreciates your interest, your participation the last 2+ days, and we have really benefited from the opportunity to be with you, and hope you all received just a little benefit from being with us. I'm going to introduce the last speaker, but first I was going to introduce this sign, which I know you can't read now, but the original poster was twice this length, and this information was provided to us by Dr. Randolph Shields, Inez and Macaulay Adams, and Earl Adams. Now, Dr. Shields is up in the Methodist Church Cemetery in Cades Cove, but Earl and Granny are sitting right here. And in 1892, I guess you took a couple of trips across the Rich Mountain Road. Now, this was the road that our next speaker will talk about folks left the cove on. But this is interesting. I consider it now a part of our Cades Cove heritage, because what they did, Dr. Shields and the Adams family went along, and for every turn in the road they made a squiggle. It's not necessarily to scale, but it does point out who lived there, what happened there, and some of the history that happened along that road. So it's relevant because it's Cades Cove heritage now. It's also relevant to our last subject of this series of presentations. So I invite you at your leisure after this presentation to stop by, and it's kind of an eye chart because the scale got small, because I couldn't handle anything longer than this in my truck. But anyway, that's what this is about here.
Dave?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell them one road is the Indian Road.
I did yesterday for those
you already did.
Yeah.
There's 3 different.
Oh, okay, Granny. There are indications of the original Indian path across the mountain. The 1836 wagon road, I'll call it, as well as the present road is what you see most of here. But you can kind of see where they kind of merged and deviated and stuff like that in the interpretation of the experts. Okay, I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, and I beg Julie for the opportunity. I've only known Mr. Abbott for about a month now. I've liked Mr. Abbott for about a month now. I've been impressed with him. He's got children that have been very successful in their chosen endeavors. But, and I've asked Mr. Abbott and several people, what does he go by? Otis, O-D-I-S, Clinton, which one? And I've never got a straight answer out of it, but it doesn't matter to me because I call him Mr. Abbott. He was born in Cades Cove to Elmer and Ella Tipton Abbott. His backgrounds includes Lawsons, Cables, Tiptons, as well as Abbotts. Excuse me. His relatives owned, his immediate family as well as his relatives owned extensive properties in the cove when the park was established. And his movement, his family's movement from the cove was mandatory. He was just 13. Just 13. 13 is a pretty good young'un for those who were moving for the cove. So he retains memories of the cove. And I'll tell your age anyway, Mr. Abbott. I hope you don't whop me in the head later. Mr. Abbott's 87 years old. And not many are left like that. His family relocated within Blount County, where Clint has been a lifetime resident. He and his wife, Phyllis Bernice Sheets, have 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. He retired from Alcoa as an electrician, a skill he still practices with, I'll call it your side yard appliance repair business. Ovens and refrigerators and all kinds of things electrical that are broke and need some tender loving care. He's quite an accomplished harp singer, enjoys ballroom dancing, and provides service to his community with things like the Blount County Food Pantry or Food Bank or something like that. So we appreciate you. We welcome you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't like what I say, blame him. If you appreciate what I say, still give him benefit of it. Because he's the man that called me and more or less said he didn't give me much choice. He said, you have to do this. And me not being a speaker or a politician or a preacher, it put me on the spot. I'm at a loss to do this or even attempt to do it. But he has been by my side ever since he asked me. He's come down to the house a couple of times. We've sat and talked, discussed what he wanted to hear or what he wanted me to try to tell people. I can't tell you very much. And no doubt there's people here that had the same experience I had. Leaving our community, leaving our churches, leaving our schools, leaving our neighbors. The whole ball of wax. There's other people that's had the same experience I have. They might not be hardly as old as I am, but it's still the same thing. It don't matter about the age. It's something that we was up against and couldn't do anything about it. He introduced me as Otis C. Abbott. It's O-D-I-S, it's not O-T-I-S. That was an elevator outfit. And it's C-L-I-N-T-O-N, and it's not President Clinton. That's what my father and mother named me. And I went through high school as Clinton. And after graduating from high school, I went out to the aluminum company to try to get work. And they hired me. And they looked at me and said, we want your first name and your middle initial. And I said, well, it's O-T-I-S C. Abbott. Well, I was out there a year and a half or so, and World War II come along, and Uncle Sam said, we need you. I went to the Navy. They said, we want your first name and your middle initial. Well, after 3 years in there in a uniform, I continued to be Otis C. Abbott. My high school graduate students, people, don't know Otis C. Abbott. They know Clinton Abbott. But there's nothing I can do about it. I've been Otis Abbott now since about 45, 46, when Uncle Sam turned me loose, let me come back home. Trying to get some thoughts together about this thing of the last days in Cades Cove. Mr. Post helped me a lot. I said I wasn't a speaker to start with, but he made me out some notes and statements, and I read over them and studied them and changed them a little, added to them a little, And I hope to tell some a few personal things that maybe you get a kick out of or a laugh out of, besides the facts that we have in books. I have here under this thing a book by Mr. Derwood Dunn, The Life and Death of a South Appalachian Community, which I've read a lot of books about Cades Cove, and that is the nearest true one that I have found. There might be some things in it, a variation from what the facts were, but he come awfully true, awfully close to telling it the way I remember it. We start out with the formation of the park. Research, I wasn't old enough to know this personally, but research tells me that big businessmen in Knoxville and Asheville had this brainstorm about making a park. And it continued to grow and thrive and multiply and so forth and so on. And it started in the early 20s. Best I can find out from research. Could have been, I was born in 19 and I wasn't old enough to realize what was happening or understand. We didn't have news then like we do. We didn't have the TV. We didn't even have radio. Very few people had a daily newspaper. And I didn't know too much about this plan for the park or the talk about making a park even. But it grew and thrived, and they talked to this person and that person, and it multiplied, and it become, they wanted to make a park out of the Smoky Mountains. And there was a big question at the time whether Cades Cove would be involved in it or not, or included in it. And at one time they said, no, it won't be. Well, of course that pleased the people that was in the cove. Sometime later, a few months, this thing took place over years, not just a few days. Sometime later, they decided, yeah, we're going to include Cades Cove. Well, when they decided that, Cades Cove people didn't appreciate it. There just wasn't no appreciation about it, because we didn't want to be uprooted from our homes and our neighbors and our friends. But that's actually what took place. We were uprooted, forced. Some of them objected, but it still went on. And they finally decided that Cades Cove would be included. I think that the majority of the people wanted to be, or didn't want to be, uprooted or moved. A few thought we could have a better life moved, and we could. We maybe did. Some of us, no doubt, did have a better life. I probably had a better life out of Cades Cove than I would have had it been excluded from the park and we stayed in the park. But at the time, it was hard to fathom. It was hard to realize, to understand how that being moved, uprooted, and told you have to go could be an improvement. Let's go to this first picture, Mr. Dave.
Behind you, sir.
Yeah, that's right up there. That is my family. I'll maybe get this stuff out of sync. I maybe ought to use this as an introduction, but that tall fella right there behind the lady is supposed to be me. And I want you to notice particularly that he's got hair. He hadn't always been like this, what you're seeing. But that's my family. My father and my mother my older sister next to me. I was the oldest, she was next to me. My brother back between the two ladies, two girls, is Willard Abbott. And this girl here was June Abbott. And the one behind the little girl is Bonnie Mae Abbott. And the little girl is my baby sister. And the other one is Nedger. And two of my sisters, the two older ones, are passed away. I only have three left. But my brother and us three children are still kicking around. My brother still works a little. I still work a little. Even though at my age, I shouldn't be, maybe, but if I quit, why, they might as well take me on to the cemetery, is my feelings. And I won't. Wife says, when are you going to retire? And I said, when I'm done. So, we'll get back now to some stuff that went on in the park. And these latter days was from, let's say, from 25 to 40. When Dave first asked me about this, I thought, well, it'd just be a few days, 6 months. The last 6 months that I was in Cades Cove. No, I kept thinking about that. No, that's not what he wants. This last days was, the latter days was over a long period of time, from in 24, 25 to 40, or even later. It's still going on. It's not ended yet. And we get down here to a statement he come to me with. The people buying the property from the people in the cove, and they had buyers appointed or so forth to come around and try to buy the property. Well, my father had his, he asked almost or twice what he ended up getting. But it don't hurt to ask. Even you're trading today, you can always ask for more money. But whether you get it or not is something else. But my father had the little acreage described here, and this is 43 and a half acres cultivated, 25 acres in woods. I remember that quite well as a growing up in the Cades Cove. Help work the ground, help farm, help do the things that a youngster could do on the farm. And he's got the pencil right out where our home place was. It was in a past the Primitive Baptist Church. Anybody that's familiar with the Cades Cove, at the time we lived there was a road went around the edge of the cemetery, and there was a gate across the road. You opened that gate, went through it, and then you closed the gate and went on down to the house. And these old farm roads that was across the cove aren't there anymore. The old road down through those woods to the old house that we lived in, there's trees in the middle of it, 12, 15 inches thick. And I drove an old car down through there when I was about 11, 12. And I go up there and look today, and it's hard for me to determine exactly where that old road was. But I can line her up between the trees. And but Dad maneuvered around with the wires and asked them. He finally settled for $52.50, and Of course, after the settlement, there wasn't nothing left for us to do but to move. And this picture here is an old barn. We didn't have any pictures of the old house. I remember some things about that old barn as a youngster that might be of interest to somebody if I could tell it like it actually was. This section right in up close to this end, the best of my memory, here right up on this end. The far end was the stables for the horses, but right in this end was a corn crib. And after Dave contacted me about this, I got to thinking, and I'm still thinking, about corn. And I wonder, I've been told that the Indians were growing corn when the Europeans come over here. And I wonder, was there corn in Europe before that? Was that the first corn?
Well, no, sir.
Anybody know? What? Well, and corn become very, very important in our livelihood, as I remember it in Cades Cove. Best I remember, Dad planted 6 or 8 acres of corn every year. We planted it, we cultivated it, we harvested it, we brought it and put it in a crib. We cut the stalk off from the ear up. We pulled the blades off of the stalk below the ear, tied it in bundles, tied them tops in bundles. We used that for food for our stock, our cows and our calves. And the corn, we brought it in, put it in the crib. And Dad always wanted a black snake in that crib. Because the crib wasn't rat proof, but that black snake made it pretty well rat proof. So it was very important to us. If you stop and think, we didn't have any tractors. Oxen was years before my time. We had to team horses. And when we worked those horses hard, we fed them corn. They got corn. Dad insisted that they get corn. Hay wasn't enough. They had to have some corn to work. And we always had a couple of pigs. And they got the scraps from the kitchen. And when they got pretty well grown or big, they started getting corn. And they'd get corn until they couldn't hardly stand up. And along about Thanksgiving, they got hit in the head with a hammer and stuck in the throat with a butcher knife and slaughtered. And we had our meat for a long period of time. The cows were fed a little corn crushed to help produce some milk. We had a flock of chickens. We fed them some corn too. It's hard for us to realize how important corn was to us, our livelihood, when I was a youngster. Another thing we had was corn squeezings. Anybody ever heard of that? Well, if you didn't, the corn squeezings was made up in some of those hollers in Cades Cove where they had a spring or creek up above them. And they could bring water down through a pipe or a channel or something down there and distill that whiskey. And you call it corn whiskey or you call it corn squeezins. It was quite important too. I recall one time when, me being the oldest child, I come home with the measles. And I got over the measles, partially. Of course, the rest of the family was a get. And I got up over the measles enough to go, and Dad said, "You go so and so, get me a half a gallon of whiskey." And it happened to be one of my uncles. So I go over and tell him what Dad wants. He gets out a half a gallon fruit jar and fills it up. I won't tell what it was, but it don't matter. Then to go, the revenuers don't know anything about that. Anyway, I brought the whiskey back home, and Dad mixed up some whiskey and rock candy and maybe some ginger, some different items, and give it to my brothers and sisters younger than me, and he'd help break the measles out. And when you get them measles broke out on the body quite thoroughly, why, they didn't take too long till you started getting over them. You started getting better. And so corn was important. I hadn't thought too much about that till they folks jumped on me about this thing and said, "You want to talk or need to talk?" Said, "You maybe know some things that other people might enjoy hearing." So let's get back now to these people that sold their property. Some agreed to sell, which my father was one of them. Some asked for lifetime dowries, and some got them. And Uncle Noah Birchfield was one of them. I remember him personally. I don't remember just what age I was. I think he lived to be 83 or 4. But at the time I remember him, he was 81. Well, I thought that was ancient. And he had a mule that was 27 years old. Well, now that's old for a mule. But somebody asked Uncle Noah, he said, "What do you keep that old mule for?" Oh, he said, "I keep him for the good he has done." And I remember a picture. I don't have it, or don't know of anybody that's got it. But he was plowing that mule in a hand plow. Him 81 years old, and having the mule 27 years old. So he asked for a dowry, I think, and was given to it. Other people, according to records, Aunt Becky Cable, Dave Sparks, J.J. Gregory, different people had different agreements with the sellers or buyers to get out of the park. Mr. Kermit Cawhorn leased property from the park, is my understanding, and he stayed there longer than anybody. He was the last to be there, and raised his family there. I knew him, but he was the only one of the family that I ever was acquainted with. I wasn't acquainted with his wife. I wasn't acquainted with any of his children. They're still living here, some of them in Blount County. They may be some of them here today. I hope they are. But I stopped and talked to him at different times when he lived his later years when my grandparents at home when I was a child, before Mr. Carter stayed most of the years that he stayed after the park. Let me read just a little here, see what I can come up with. Dad traded with them for the 52-52 or what was on that board there a while ago. Anyway, no, don't go back to it, Dave. Don't worry about it. We had the money. Dad bought an old car soon after he got the money for the farm. And he come to Maryville and got it, paid $650 for it. Brand new Plymouth, 32 model Plymouth. And brought it back home, and we was uptown. The whole family could crawl in that thing and go to church. And we had that old car. Dad had it for years, and I wished a million times that I'd have went out there when it got down to its latter years or latter days, and said, Dad, I want that car. What do you want for it? I'd have bought it. I'd have given him a good price for it, and I put it in storage and kept it. It'd have been worth a fortune today if I could have kept it that long. But I didn't. It's awful easy to see what you fail to do after it's too late. He bought that old car. We had that old car when we moved. We loaded up the next day after Christmas in '32. Best I remember. I'm not positive. And one of Dad's younger brothers had an old cattle truck. I don't remember the make or model. I've been asked what it was, and I do not remember. But we loaded up what junky furniture Dad and Mother had. It wasn't much in that old cattle truck, and I don't believe we had even canvas to go over what stuff we had. I do remember this. We had a chicken coop tied up on top of that thing with the chickens in the coop. And I was riding in the truck with my uncle, and when we got to the top of Rich Mountain, which he showed here on that thing here, that road deal a while ago. Anyway, when we got to the top of that Rich Mountain, we stopped. And I remember this distinctly. The lid opened on that chicken coop, and these two old hens got out. And we wasn't going to get out and run them old hens, try to catch them. So we shut the doors, drove off. I'd say there's some foxes had a good meal. Maybe 2 or 3 of them, I don't know. But we left 2 old hens on top of the mountain. And as far as he gave me another subject here, emotions, about leaving family and going to other schools, other churches. That was emotional. There's no question about it. I was a young person. My family was young. We moved down in the neighborhood where I still live. Got down there and they called me a Cades Cove hillbilly. Well, I went to the Navy and they called me a Tennessee hillbilly. And I'm still not ashamed of that. In fact, I'm proud of it. Somebody asked me when I was in the Navy what I represented, what towns I represented. And I said, I don't represent any town. I said, I represent some little shacks on the side of the hill that's home to people where they beat out a living out of the woods and the hillsides. Grow some garden and some corn. That's who I represent. Uniform. I don't represent some town, but I survived them 3 years. But we had emotions about school, and different things, and we moved to the story is that this old house that we lived in was 3 rooms. It was. But there was 2 of them was massive, big rooms. I'd say, guessing that they was 20 by 20 or 24 by 20. And then we had a room running off from it where we went by the dining table, and then the kitchen was out in the end of that room. Like a stove, cook stove. We cooked on a little old wood stove. Mother cooked on a wood stove. We didn't have electricity. We was lucky to have a wood stove. Put stove wood in. Something I missed back in there on that corn deal was we had cornbread. Keeps coming back to me things that I meant to say, and I passed them up. We ate a lot of cornbread. We'd go down there to that crib that I talked about, and my dad and I, and my brother, when he got big enough to help us a little, and we'd shuck corn and get the bad end of it off where the worms had been when it was growing. We got rid of that, and we shelled that corn and had a clean sack of corn. Dad would throw it on an old horse, divide the sack, part of it in one end, each end of the sack, throw me up on top of it, and go to mill. Well, I'd ride the old horse to mill. And the miller'd come out and get the sack of corn, and sometimes he'd grind what I brought, sometimes he'd swap with it. And I'd bring that meal back home, and we eat a lot of cornbread. It's good. I still like cornbread. But that's things that I forgot to mention back then when I was talking about the corn. Moved to a bigger house down in the Clover Hill, Benfield area of Blount County. Benfield was a settlement at that time. It's not anything on our name anymore. But we moved down there, and the old house we went to down there had about 6 rooms. It was a bigger house. The family enjoyed it more. And we had a better life. But there's something that I want to tell that's not pleasant. Dad bought the old car, $650. I think he went down there and bought a place with this bigger house on it. I think he gave $3,200, $3,500 something for it. And Mother bought some curtain material for the old house. I'm not sure about what Dad had bought, but Dad bought something that was quite a little bit of money. I know he bought some new horses at one time, but I'm not sure just what he bought. But they wrote checks for them things that they'd bought, and the bank didn't open. Dad and Mother went from $600 or $700 in the bank to borrowing money to take care of those checks overnight. If I'm not mistaken, that was the year 33. Bank didn't open. They never did get the right amount of money out of that bank. They got a little percentage on the dollar. I don't remember just what it was, but it wasn't near the dollar that he lost in it. We had it rough. for years, trying to make a living, and them sending us to school, and we picked strawberries, we picked raspberries. Dad hauled them to town and sold them for whatever he could get for them to have a little money. It was a rough life. I worked of a morning for an hour and a half before I went to school. I got home after school, I worked another hour and a half before dark. And I still wasn't a man. That was 14, 15 years old, 16, somewhere along in there. Those things happened to us. And it wasn't pleasant. But we survived. Hey, something I forgot. I wanted to tell you about my grandchildren. Dave didn't want me to. We met new classmates at school, and new teachers, new people at church, and all of that kind of stuff. It was an experience. I met new people when I went to the Navy, but I didn't care. That didn't bother me a bit, meeting them there strange boys from the Navy. There's some of them from Boston and Pennsylvania, and they'd make fun of my southern lingo, and I'd laugh at them and tell them they couldn't talk either. I see another note here. It says, not much left of the old home place. And there's a little story that I want to tell. You remember me pointing out that boy had hair in that picture? Well, some 12 or 15 years ago, my son and grandson, I forgot where we were. Anyway, my son said, Dad, said, let's go back down to the old home place. You need to take us back down there. All right. Well, we parked at the Primitive Baptist Church, got out and started walking down through the woods to where the old house stood so many years before. Nothing there. And nothing there, the old lawn. But this grandson was about 10, 11 years old. And we got down there to the old house. I said, his name is Jason. I said, Jason, there's some old iron ore pits off down here that I used to play in. And let's go down there. Well, we proceeded to go on down toward where the old iron ore pits was. Somebody had prospected for iron years before. It was before my time. I didn't know anything about it. The old pits were there. They were holes dug in the ground. And there was iron ore, a little of it around on the banks, so forth, where you could see rock and you could see the iron in it. But evidently it wasn't strong enough or heavy enough to be mined or successful to use. But these old pits were there. Well, when I lived there, there was pines growing around them old pits, and of course there's pine needles all over the ground. But I'd get me a board from an old sawmill somewhere that was rounded on one side where they'd sawed the side off a log, tear the bark off of it, put me a little foot piece out in front with a couple of nails. I'd slide down them banks. Carry that board back up and slide down them banks again. Well, I told Jason that story. I said, Jason, I used to slide down these banks when I was a little boy. Yeah, Papa. Said, I can just imagine a little bald-headed boy. It's like he stretched his imagination just a little. I still want to tell you about my grandchildren. We can return to these old places. I had a picture somewhere where Mr. Shields was going to.
Coming right up, sir.
He returned to his old place, and I knew the man personally, and I knew his family. Dave knew his family too, I think. There's a picture of him. That's him standing right here in the front of this thing. I knew Mr. Shields personally. I was just a child, and he was a family man, had a family. He had a son about my age named Calvin, and we played together quite often. Went to church together. I'd be over there at his home. He'd be over at my home. On Sundays, we'd exchange. We were big chums in Cades Cove. Once we left Cades Cove, he lived out in the wood area, and I lived down in the Banfield area. We didn't see much of each other anymore after we left Cades Cove. I still thought the world of the man, and he respected me, thought the world of me. But we didn't see much of each other in our later lives. He didn't know my family, and I didn't know his. We can return to these places in our mind and in our memories, but
Keep right on, sir. I don't know what the problem is there.
well,
Anything to do with you.
I'm not worried about it.
Oh, we got like your grandchild back here helping you.
Well, I could say this out of the blue. There's 4 generations here today of me. Three besides me, at least. I'm the first one, and my son's here. He's in his 60s. His son's in his 30s. My great grandson back there in his daddy's arms, pulling his hair. He's 2 or a little better. And there was a picture of us in the Maryville Times when he was a little younger than he is now. He was sitting on he'd sit on my lap then, he won't now. He don't have much to do with Papa now. But these things pop into my mind, and I have to say them when I think of them, or I'd forget them. We return to these places and think about the old things, and the old roads, and the old outbuildings that were there. And they're all gone. Majority of the old home places, there's nothing there but the ground. There's not some places there's an old chimney still standing a little that nobody's parked over or moved over. There's something else comes to my mind that I want to tell. If somebody gets tired of me talking, why they can leave or come up here and leave me out. Ever what they want to do. A few days, this happened, it wasn't just one family this happened to, it happened to several families. Inez can attest to it. She knows it happened just like I do. A few days before we left that old house, my aunt and her family moved in with us. We loaded up our junk and left them there. The Park Service couldn't tear the house down if you was living in it. And as quick as we got out of it, they wanted it demolished so people would get out of Cades Cove. But if you got moved in it before when the other people left, well, they couldn't tear it down, and you living in it very handily. And she and her family was still there in 35. Best I can find out, they were in that old house. And that did happen. We wasn't the only family that did that. There was a lot of families that happened to. I know some of them personally. In fact, the George Shields family, where he went back here, the Fons Cable family moved into that house when he left. And if my memory's not badly wrong, and they lived in that house for a long time. Everybody in Cades Cove didn't own the property. A lot of people were renters or lived in some old shack that somebody else had left, and it was difficult time. Now, I'm about to run out of anything to tell people. I've got
Mr. Oliver.
What?
You want to go to Mr. Oliver's picture?
Well, yeah, let's go to Mr. Oliver's picture.
I've got it. I'm going to stay with you.
I've got a note here. It says, last days of Cades Cove will come when the forests take the meadows. Think about that just for a minute. That's my thoughts. Cades Cove will be there forever. But the person that's a tourist comes in and travels around the loop road in Cades Cove today doesn't have an inkling of what Cades Cove was when I lived there. They have no idea. They cannot have an idea of what Cades Cove was like. And driving around the loop road in an out-of-state tag automobile does not present Cades Cove. It presents a valley that, in my opinion, it's been approximately 75 years since I left Cades Cove. It has changed so much in those 75 years that if it were not for those mountains that you can see looking up any direction you look, it'd be hard to know where you were. It's just not the same place. Of course, I won't be here. Probably nobody in this room will be here 75 years from now. But if there isn't some different ideas formed, I think the last days of Cades Cove will be when the forests take the meadows. And it's gradually happening. In the old days, the whole sides of those mountains were cleared. People lived up there. They grew crops up there. They raised their family up there. Each valley, each hollow had a creek coming out of it. And there was an old road up that creek, and the people lived up that creek. But the person that rides around the loop road in Cades Cove today doesn't know that. You can't tell him that, because there's nobody to tell him that. And I'm thinking that the last days of Cades Cove, that's my opinion, the last days of Cades Cove will be then. Now this gentleman right here, Mr. John Oliver, he was my mail carrier when I lived up there. No doubt he's probably got relatives in the group today, or descendants. He didn't know me, I don't guess. Maybe knew where I belonged as a child. But his children, he had a son about my age. And we were in school together. We fought like dogs one day and loved each other the next. We'd have a fist fight one day and then we'd study together the next day. And the teacher laughed at us. But he's gone. And I think he has one brother maybe still living. And the rest of the family is gone. I'm about through telling you my experiences and my things. I've forgotten a lot that I planned to say, no doubt, but that's part of being my age.
Questions? This is Cades Cove here. Anybody got a question? I hear one.
You know I was there. Your old home place, was it close to where Roy took that last barn down back in there on that ridge?
Just describe it again, Mr. Abbott, where your home place was.
Yeah, can you get us
Flash
as close
flash
to
your
it as
picture back up
possible?
there and I'll
Yeah,
get
that
it.
Clinton, that's the barn over next door to our old bank.
Yeah. That's the old barn. Now, what was your question?
How close was your home to where the cow horn barn was that Roy took down just a few years ago?
That was the one at our old bank. Turn that over at our old bank.
Well, this old barn was across the cove, actually, from where Kermit lived.
No, he's asking about the last barn that Kermit tore down.
Was that close to your home place?
What was that the old barn there at
No, it's the one Kermit built, not that.
the barn that he built?
Yeah, it tore down.
It was close to your place.
It wasn't close to it.
Yeah, but it was just built over that kitchen, the barn, he built that.
You can see from my lane, that's the one he got to do. And your house was on over, between there and
About halfway, the house was about halfway between that barn and the Friends Church.
Okay.
How often did you go to school? Like a few months a year or?
Oh, I went to, no, we was later than that time. You're asking about a
So you
time
went year-round.
when they only had school for a few months.
Right.
We had school 8, 9 months, just similar, quite similar to what we have today. When I was in school, we had an old 3-room schoolhouse, and all of us was in 2 rooms, have 1 through 4 and 5 through 8 was in 1 room. Best I remember now of that. And we had 2 teachers, and at a time, those 2 teachers lived in that other room of the old school building. They made that their home, and they was there. But we went to school for the same length of time, 8 to 9 months. Best I remember. Now, what you're asking is, I've read where the children went to school in the spring and the fall, and they wasn't in school for that many months. Yes, ma'am.
Which school did you go
The
to?
consolidated school that's in the record. The 2-story part of it was before my time. My time was after they tore the top off of it